Nau mai, hoki mai, ki The Fold, imihine, ko Duncan Grieve, tōku ingoa, and welcome back to The Fold for 2025, and Rafiti Connell.
Hello, Duncan. Welcome back.
Thank you. I've been at work for 2 hours. Feels quite intense to be on a live mic, but there's been so much to discuss. I'm really glad I've got you, of all people, here to talk about it, because I love talking about social media and platforms and their interplay with sort of culture and society with you. And my gosh, has there been a lot of that in the off season?
Just no rest for the wicked. I totally shut off kind of local news. I mean, because there wasn't heaps. It was like
I think it's a mutual decision that the country makes. We'll just try and do almost nothing.
That's what I like. It's just like sharks and sea lice, and kind of that was it. But it was very difficult not to look at what was happening in the US at the moment. So
what we're going to do today is basically sort of drill into the two big storylines of the off season. Firstly, Meta's decision to make a number of quite profound changes into sort of how it kind of polices or doesn't police and distribute speech on its platforms, and what the sort of ongoing or outflowing implications are for New Zealand of that, and also about the sort of will they or won't they and how will they of the TikTok ban, which when I went to sleep yesterday TikTok was not functioning in the US. I wake up this morning and it is, but it's kind of hard to know how real either of those things are, and so we'll talk about that in some depth as well. And then at the end of this, just as Shane Curry has sort of shamelessly co-opted the One Good Text format from Ben Smith at Semaphore, we're going to sort of shamelessly run through his 25 predictions for 2025 and give a quick response and maybe a little bit more detail to each one of those. So that will be the fold for today. Let's start off with this Meta thing, because it was both, very much in tune with a broader kind of move of the sort of large technology platforms to a sort of more Trumpian kind of approach to business and speech, but also quite a huge jag for the company. Do you want to start by telling us, just kind of recapping again for our audience what the changes were, and maybe we could chat a bit about how they were announced?
Yeah, I mean, so Mark Zuckerberg, and there's been a lot of background reporting on, I guess, kind of how this came to be, this latest announcement that he made via video. So there's been a lot of talk about the fact that he has been to Mar-a-Lago, he has met with Trump, he's been sat down by Stephen Miller, Trump's immigration advisor, and essentially the indication has been since Trump's election that Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, technology companies, we talked about Jeff Bezos last time you and I were together, were amenable to working with Trump, which is quite different from the last time he was elected. There was quite a lot of defiance and rebellion. So he got a whole bunch of people together working over the holidays. It was quite unusual. So usually when changes occur at Meta, it is done via sort of almost a civic engagement process. This was done with a much smaller group of people. And he made the video.
It's interesting, right? Just to kind of hop on the civic engagement process thing, is Meta can at times feel like it considers itself almost like a public utility or a public good, and it had its kind of Supreme Court that it created, and the civic engagement process, like talking to outside institutions. How should we be? Is it behaving in a way that it would if it was a sort of kind of a monopoly supplier of a particular kind of infrastructure for society, and therefore it should take society's views into account as it evolves? And what it was doing now, and this has been a theme of some different aspects of what Facebook has done in the last few years, is behaving much more like a privately held authoritarian or monarchic company that basically Zuckerberg makes a decision, convenes a little war room, and runs it like a sprint, which is like a classic kind of way of achieving very fast change within a technology environment.
Well, I think also if you looked at it like in a political context, because there's an argument, in terms of the money that Meta makes, people have compared it to nation states, right? And so there's a degree to which I think there was a period of social media which felt quite warm and fuzzy and akin to kind of like participatory democracy.
Yes.
And now the political and cultural environment have massively changed, particularly in the US, and we're not doing that anymore. We're not adhering to these nice ideas and nice conventions about everybody being able to have a say. We're doing what we want to do, right? So that's what's going on. He made the announcement, and probably the most, I guess, significant announcement was that they were disestablishing their fact-checking team. So for a long period of time, Facebook have made quite a big deal about the mechanisms they have in place to counter misinformation, disinformation, hateful speech, extremist content, all of that kind of thing. And one of those has been a team of human fact-checkers. Getting rid of that, at the same time, Zuckerberg called that team out for what he said was political bias. So he topped this whole announcement essentially around aligning with the recent election and sort of cultural and societal shifts around what free speech meant and the defence of free speech. So the fact-checking team, replacement with community notes, which is something that Elon Musk instituted on X, where essentially if something is posted and it is disputed or not true, you can contribute to essentially putting that kind of fact right. So you see it on X all the time. You'll see it on kind of videos that look kind of innocent, and then the community piles in, somebody has watched it all the way through and says, actually, this is an ad for gambling and that's banned and da-da-da-da-da. So that's probably the most significant one. And then kind of bundling that up in a way that is not so much about the platform but about the company, but very much in the same vein of we are working kind of hand in hand in lockstep with this new thinking around what free speech means. So they have gotten rid of diversity, equity and inclusion programs, so DEI. He blamed Sheryl Sandberg, his former COO, for what he essentially sort of came to call the neutering of corporate America, and said that, this was on Joe Rogan's podcast, not in the video, but said that corporate America needed more masculine energy. So he's blamed it on the woman that used to work
He's
for
leaning
him.
out.
We're not leaning in anymore. We're leaning way out. They've removed the non-binary and transgender flags that you used to be able to have on the Messenger app. They have tweaked the kind of stuff around what was and wasn't allowed to be said on Facebook. So the hateful conduct stuff, which means that you can now say that gay people are mentally ill.
So, you can. It's quite interesting the way that they're sort of introducing that. Like you can't say that white people are mentally ill, but you can say that gay people are mentally ill. But you can say that a particular race was responsible for spreading COVID, for example. So there's been like an explosion in the parameters of available speech, but it's not total. And it is in ways that are kind of like, well, if you're going to go there, just like surely it's all on.
Yeah, so it's craven and political, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think we should not say that, and I don't think we should pretend that this is about a purity of free speech at all.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk a bit about the kind of the logical parts of it, because it's a weird thing, right? Like there's parts of it, like I should say, like the video is funny, like objectively.
The video is funny. Well, I mean, let's talk about the video. So he's in a. So Mark Zuckerberg has had a glow up over the last kind of year.
But it's like feels like a politically kind of aligned grow up. He started to do jiu-jitsu. He's gotten quite bulky.
He's grown his hair out. He's wearing a like $990,000 watch. Just no qualms.
Yeah, it's all kind of signaling that matches the explicit text of what he's saying. But at the same time, he's still talking in his kind of this kind of even-handed, kind of slightly all shucks way that he always has, which is not quite congruent. So there's still there's still this sense of him. He's always the last of the big guys to the party. As a result, it doesn't feel like it's either a person seeing around corners or a person who's been led by their convictions. It's a person who just can kind of see in straight lines and understands in quite a kind of fairly basic way what is the most expedient move for the company at that time.
I think that's the thing. Like, I think that, there's been quite a lot of, Meta and Mark Zuckerberg have just shown, the mask has dropped. They've shown us who they truly are. And then
underneath the mask, there's another mask. There is only mask.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's just mask after mask.
Yeah.
And then some people have said, oh, no, they've always been like this. This was the app built to rate women at college kind of thing. And I don't think either is the case.
Agreed.
I genuinely think this is politically craven manoeuvring, that they swung hard the other way.
Yeah. Well, I sort of believe, I think both things can be true in a way, in the sense that I think that he sincerely feels this stuff right now because it's expedient, but there isn't like a core, like it's not like he has a particular persuasion that every so often gets dragged another way. He's just very persuadable by what the moment is. And honestly, like, were it not for the fact that he's one of the richest, most powerful people in the world, I'm like, that's true of a lot of people. It's probably true of me to an extent at times. The thing that's kind of a bit ugly about it all is just how hard he's swinging. Like the removal of the trans and non-binary kind of flags from within Messenger, or the tampons from men's bathrooms. It's like these are such small, unnecessary things that there's a sense that it's kind of gleeful about it. With some of the larger stuff, like I do think that fact-checking as an institution, it was overwhelmingly, and there's a lot of evidence to support this, that it did have some forms of political bias, and that, the sort of canonical cases of the lab leak theory, which was pulled down from everywhere, just considered false, is now considered the most likely explanation for where COVID came from. But there are a number of other examples of where there was a particular kind of political lens around a fact that didn't, it wasn't a fact as we would typically understand it. Hunter Biden's laptop being another one that was kind of flagged as Russian misinformation until years later it was confirmed as entirely true. So I've got some sympathy from there, and I even think community notes, because of the connection to, like, Wikipedia is effectively community notes.
Exactly.
That's not always an awful way to go about things, even if there's something distasteful about such a massively profitable company relying on volunteer labor to kind of moderate its content. But so in some ways it's like the other stuff that is there just to kind of fawn over a new administration's kind of perspectives that is uglier than what the core and most important elements of what they're doing are.
Well, the other stuff is it's meat out to the masses around culture war, hot button topics, right? Whereas if he had just sort of had the conversation that he had around fact checking and political bias is everywhere. It's in everything, right? And it just so happens that what might have been an accepted fact 8 years ago was in fact something that was kind of guided by an accepted political wisdom or political ideology or whatever it is. And we're swinging back the other way now. If it was just that, if there was a purity around that, fine. The rest of it feels like it's very much being packaged up as an offering to Trump, to those that are advising him. And it does feel like, it's not an insignificant point that, before Christmas in November, a judge in the US said that Meta, could be up on antitrust stuff or needed to appear in court around antitrust stuff, and that they should be broken up and that they were monopolistic. So they do have, and they have increasingly faced threats around regulation all over the world, right? I think there's a degree to which this is trying to match that kind of Trumpian energy of almost rising above the accepted conventions and norms, law, the Supreme Court, and becoming ungovernable to a certain extent.
Well, and also because they're not just doing that in a domestic context. He explicitly in the video talks about how in other countries, most notably the EU, Canada, and Australia, they are trying to make laws that sort of have, at a most basic level, have negative commercial implications for Meta, and if you're trying to take a more high-minded one, have implications for speech on his platforms. And he's explicitly drawn a line between would like to work with Trump in a very kind of America First way to ensure that our speech policies within America, which are really different to what we have here and really different to norms in many societies. And that's one of the things we've always tried to grapple with large technology platforms that are built in a country which has very permissive boundaries around speech. But they're imposed in countries which have really different cultures and philosophies around it. And so that's the kind of a thing that I think is quite challenging and somewhat scary is that, as we've discussed quite a bit on this podcast, like you are losing your ability to make laws, losing your own sovereignty around the largest communication platforms in the world that have ever existed. And now, where previously their threats to you were we might withdraw services or change services, now he's explicitly essentially asking Trump to say, use this as a trade weapon. So if they, as in Australia, they try to introduce, a system of fines for violations of different, if you allow scams on your platform, or if you allow minors to access social media because they banned that, then we will try and use a trade weapon to prevent it. And because it's such a giant trade market, there are very few countries which can kind of pivot away from that. So it's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, and I don't think. I mean, I think you can separate out some of the implications and what you might therefore see on Meta platforms from now on. I mean, look, to be honest, Facebook in particular has been a junkyard for a very long time, as far as I'm concerned, and I've always found it odd to see actual real live content from real live pages, brands, I mean, the other thing they have said is that they are not going to downgrade political content anymore because both Meta and Instagram in particular were really hot on this. So Instagram is not a place for talking about politics. It's for nice photos.
He's calling it civic content now.
Civic content.
So cute.
So that's kind of changed. So I don't know. I mean, the other thing there is that it's kind of like we know that content specifically drives, it's rage bait. And that's what drives kind of engagement on those platforms. So on one hand, a lot has changed. And on the other, I think it will be interesting to see what turns up on those platforms. I think it is already a pretty horrendous hellscape, to be perfectly honest. And I don't know how different. I think aesthetically it's going to be weird on Instagram.
Well, I think that, I mean, we're all, like they've announced these changes. They haven't necessarily rolled them out. And even when they're rolled out, change takes a while before a community adapts to it. So, people will not necessarily start exercising the full range of their kind of horrifically overbroad communication rights until they get a sense of A, what they're allowed to do, and B, what the sort of social envelope, what they see their peers doing. It might be, and maybe this is a good time to start talking about it, like how will this kind of play out for the kind of two big constituent parts of that group within a New Zealand context, like audiences and advertisers, because already MPs, particularly like women MPs or who come from a particular minority group, they don't love what happens there, and it's a legendarily bad job being a moderator of their accounts or of their inboxes. If you're there, to me, the case for leaving for public figures in particular, but also for brands, especially brands that have got a rainbow tick or are still haven't kind of completely junked their DEI policies, for example, like you can imagine the war machine is going to be out there patrolling, and it's going to be ever more vigorous in terms of the way it approaches these issues, knowing that there is no ban hammer coming down on them, that this is explicitly ruled in. Yeah, it'll just be very interesting, because I think it might be that in a domestic US context, this sort of works for them and it's part of the new culture. It's just how exportable are those norms?
I mean, I think, look, the reality is that we have so many platforms where people have been allowed to say whatever they like, no matter how horrific, for as long as they like. It's just this, it's now able to come completely out of the shadows, right? So it's not going to be happening on the, Truth Social or, wherever it is people talk about these things. It's going to be happening on the same platform that people use to find out, what's going on in their local community. It's going to be happening on the same platform that traditionally our politicians, our celebrities, all those people use to communicate with their fan bases and their constituencies. It's going to be happening on the same platform where brands, aspirational lifestyle brands, are showing you beautiful handbags that you might want to buy, and then directly afterwards some kind of screaming, hideous kind of AI imagery and God knows what kind of comment. Honestly, my heart goes out to anybody moderating a Facebook page or community in the coming months, because of essentially they've been kind of, you're going to just have to enforce your own community moderation policies, which is going to get increasingly difficult and more toxic. I don't know if Fold listeners have heard me say this enough, but, my big thing is get off. You do not have to be there.
Yeah.
There are other ways, and I know everybody is kind of like, oh, you're in a position of privilege to be able to say that. You've got a platform, blah, blah, blah. But genuinely speaking, I really think that the era of social media is kind of participatory democracy, social media is sort of just people hanging out online. I think it's done, and it was done when the algorithms souped up, and I think it's only going to get worse. You don't have to be there. And I think if you're a brand, there's some very real brand damage or brand danger. And like, you wouldn't buy TV spots or radio spots in the middle of something that was like, I think gay people are mentally ill.
This is what's so interesting, right? Like, I'm watching Mad Men again at the moment, and in season 2, Harry gets called into a meeting with the head of accounts because he led a spot for some, I think it's like a washing machine that has a function called the agitator, run in a TV movie about, communist spies, where one of them is referred to as an agitator. And the fact is it's about Russian espionage, that was two things that you could never be against. This advertiser didn't want to be around anything that talked about Russia and didn't want to be, and obviously didn't like the agitator link. So Sterling Cooper has to eat the cost of that campaign as a result. And you just think, we're in just such a different world now where, you could argue that they were wrong, but that was research-based, that they had those concerns. So it'll be really interesting to see how, right now it feels like there's such a push from, kind of large advertisers in particular, that they're just kind of moving onto those platforms in a huge way. This will test the limits of their tolerance for, that no one has visibility over what they're up against, which is kind of part of the problem. Like, if you could see that we're like on screen against or underneath or around all this content, that would probably make it more distasteful. So, but yeah, that's the thing that is the big unknown, is how media agencies, large corporations, and even smaller advertisers, whether they retain their stomach for being there, and even if it retains its efficiency, if audiences do start to respond negatively to it.
I think the brand thing will in part be guided by, I guess, the kind of political, cultural zeitgeist in New Zealand, because there is also it may well be that the kind of, I guess, broad sort of swing of the pendulum that's happening globally is something that does influence people here. And maybe there are brands or people in leadership positions or people who have big audiences to speak to on those platforms. Maybe they will also become less concerned about what some might consider the norms of the old world.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm absolutely willing to kind of concede that these concerns might be echoes from a past that's never coming back, and that we all have to learn to live with a really different communication environment. That's, I guess, what we're going to find out.
I mean, I think the user stuff is also very interesting. I mean, I've travelled the full journey around social media, and where I currently am at the moment is it's boring. I'm bored by it. I'm bored by what I see there. I don't want to see it anymore. There's far more interesting things to engage with.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a summer of reading books printed on paper and listening to really smart people's podcasts and reading the New York Times, and it's been nice.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the other big sort of technology, social media story of the break, which is the will they, won't they, have they, haven't they of the TikTok ban. As of right now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll also lay out what I understand to be the facts, because this is a fast-moving story. TikTok is becoming live again in the US after having gone dead again gone dead for a first time in the US in the last 24 hours. Essentially what happened was, Congress passed and Biden ultimately signed a law that basically gave a January 19th deadline for TikTok to either be sold or to be subject to a ban on the basis of it being controlled by a foreign adversary, i.e. China, on the basis of access to data, but also propensity toward manipulation. I personally find the latter part of that much more persuasive than the former, but they're two solid arguments that were ultimately challenged but unsuccessfully challenged in the Supreme Court. And the reason it went dark immediately, there was some speculation it might stay around, just slowly decay. But then basically Oracle, as a big supplier of servers to it, and then Apple and Google, who made it available in their app stores, were sort of concerned about the extent of their own vulnerability to the very harsh $5,000 US per user fines regime that accompanied it. Donald Trump has then signaled that he will sign an executive order on day one that will allow a 90-day sort of stay of execution with a chance for it to either be sold, or he's also talked about a 50-50 joint venture which could continue to be owned by China, which seems to completely defeat the purpose of it. But he's sort of swung around. He was originally the main architect of the ban. Yeah. But I think, it's really interesting. And it also connects to the Facebook situation, because if you are doing an America First argument, you do delete the app and you do allow the spoils to go to the vast bulk of them to Meta, and then a little, long tail to Snapchat and maybe some others. But it's a very strange situation, huh?
It's weird. And I think you've highlighted the kind of hypocrisy that exists within this, and that TikTok has been picked off because it's China owned, and so the concerns have been elevated into the realm of national security rather than every other concern everybody has about social media platforms. Yes, correct. Right?
Yeah.
And I also think TikTok has a degree of vulnerability to it because it is considered a place where a lot of young people are. It's quite appealing, I think, to the parents and that kind of voting constituency. They're like, it's a waste of time, it's rotting their brains, blah, 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 blah.
As opposed to my beloved Facebook.
That's my Facebook.
my brain really must
where this AI stuff is definitely real. There are indeed mermaid babies. So it's been picked off, essentially. Yeah, I think it kind of sticks out like dog's balls on that basis, right?
So, what's your position on the sort of integrity of the argument in favour of the ban?
Well, look, I have no idea because I'm not a national security expert, right? So I don't know. But I guess one of the things that I think, again, is quite contradictory is that the thing with TikTok is that, yes, it's a vertical video platform, but actually it is part of this broader e-commerce ecosystem that we don't have a lot of visibility of in New Zealand or even in America or Australia or wherever, because China has this incredible kind of in-app, do absolutely everything within your apps kind of thing. And so TikTok, as much as it is about making content in a creator economy, is also about shopping.
Yeah.
And so I suppose my question would be, why does TikTok, or why would TikTok have more data or information on me than Temu, which is another Chinese e-commerce platform, or Shein or AliExpress, right? So there is kind of an argument to say that America perhaps rates their sort of power in terms of making this move a little bit too highly, and that actually China will just get on and continue to take over the internet with its various amazing kind of shopping apps and do everything apps. I mean, one of the funny things that's happened as a result of the kind of will they, won't they weird TikTok ban, isn't it, is a migration to another Chinese, or a couple of other Chinese-owned apps, one called Red Note.
Which Chinese name translates as Little Red Book.
It does indeed, and that shot to the top of the App Store over the last kind of week, and Lemonade, which is another one. Which
is literally owned by ByteDance.
It's owned by ByteDance, and some of it was prompted by a panic from creators around, I'm moving here, you need to come with me kind of thing. The Red Note thing is quite amusing in the sense that I think it's almost about a rebellion amongst a user base. There was a really fantastic quote that Ryan Broderick had in Garbage Day a couple of days ago, which is from a user which said, "We learned how to code for MySpace. Did they really think we wouldn't learn Mandarin?" So there's also this kind of user creator stuff around TikTok as well, where it's a beloved kind of app, and it really has revolutionized and completely changed so much of how we experience kind of online content. I mean, it put vertical video right up front.
Yeah. I mean, it did, and the extent to which apps like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook have become ever more kind of vertical video forward. That's just been a pure response to TikTok having made it so ubiquitous. And I noticed that. I note, that Instagram has rolled out its version of CapCut, I think, today,
yes.
Just to kind of cope with the sort of instability around TikTok. I mean, it's a weird thing, right? Because, I sort of think that if you're going to designate China a foreign adversary, which I think, there is ample reason to, and if you're going to look at the sort of way that American companies or any foreign companies are treated on their way into China, in which, none of Meta's products are available in China, for example, and, any kind of incoming company has to create a joint venture and has to be willing to have that joint venture be built on very shaky ground, be washed away at any time. So on some level, this goes back to probably the naivety of the West, thought that by engaging with China on a trade and diplomatic level, that it would lead it towards greater democracy, which it very much has done the opposite. And yes, there is this kind of, users have some limited power to just go to another Chinese-owned app. I always think, just like the influx to Blue Sky, these things tend to be very fun things to write and think about, but the vast bulk of users are more likely just to go to Instagram where they already are.
100%. It is almost now sort of like the expected kind of behaviour, and it generates a lot of memes and a lot of think pieces and a lot of writing, but actually in terms of its kind of pure scale or mass, it's
essentially irrelevant. But I do think the question it opens up around should, Chinese companies which have full government access be allowed to sell into the US when their US equivalents are typically banned from doing the same. Once, as we are moving into what is very much a sort of a second Cold War, that's a really open question. And I think it probably will likely end up in the likes of Temu and Shein being banned, if only because there is no kind of clear reciprocity in the way that that those countries treat one another. And if you really believe in America first, which dangerous door to open, but once you're committed to that strategy, you are kind of obligated to live it. So I think personally that TikTok will go, and I think that ultimately a lot of those other companies will, because if you're pursuing a nationalist strategy, as China already was and America increasingly is, that's what you do. And I think the interesting thing for New Zealand will be, how do we respond to all this? Because we've been trying from both a foreign policy and on some level a culture perspective to play it a bit Switzerland, and I'm not sure that we're going to be allowed to do that. So it's an extremely interesting time. What how do you think this will play out? Like, there's been a lot of kind of a sense from TikTok users in the US and even globally that because it's had near-death experiences before and because it feels so big and powerful and ubiquitous that it can't go. Do you think, 90 days' time, do you think it has sold and it has been saved, or do you think it actually will disappear?
Honestly, I'm not sure, Duncan. Look, I mean, so the CEO of ByteDance will be at Trump's inauguration, right?
Quite a big tell.
Yeah, and he's made a video, sort of doffing his cap to Trump, and the message that went up when it went dark was, and thank you to President Trump, blah 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 blah.
It's amazing the way the stuff that just feels completely craven and would have been completely shocking is now just the most routine. Yes, obviously you have to kind of pray to the new president God.
That's the thing. And I mean, look, there does seem to be this quite overt consolidation of power around Donald Trump from the technology sector leaders, which is money, loads, Musk, richest man in the world. Around him, a sort of the floodgates have opened, the kind of guardrails are gone. It's essentially you can be and say and do whatever it is as long as it sort of exists within that Trumpist kind of ideology. So to me, there's a thing around money and there's a thing around a consolidation of power, which, we're all just living in a tech bro libertarian paradise and it doesn't matter if they're Chinese. And then on the other hand, as you have said, this TikTok thing really is emblematic of a whole bunch of stuff around trade and security, huge global stuff. And it doesn't make any sense for TikTok to be the outlier to what is essentially going to be a fairly isolationist kind of policy from Trump. And I think wherever people thought that he was a bit wavery around stuff, and he's not going to be like that this time around. If something is going to be done and it feels really, really extreme compared to the world that we've lived in over the last, since the end of World War II or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. He is surrounded by hardliners and enablers, and I think if they want to do this, then TikTok will just be regarded as a casualty of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But I think there's a lot more to come on that story, so I'm sure we'll talk about it some more as the events unfold. Should we rapid fire through some predictions here?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so Shane Curry, the media insider himself, roared back into life on Friday with a good column, a lot of it about the sort of various kind of new fronts on the kind of radio audience wars. But he ended it with 25 predictions for 2025. Some of which I would categorize as fairly, that's definitely a gimme, and others which were a bit more, a bit more surprising. But I thought it might be a fun way to sort of address the local media context by running through these. So I'll read them to you, and I'll get your response. Now you can just yes, no, and if there is a sort of an opportunity to be specific about which one, you can or cannot. These are the rules of the game.
Love this.
And I will do the same. Okay, we ready to go?
Yes.
At least one major media platform will close or be swallowed by another industry player.
Yes. And I think it could be Stuff.
Wow, huge. Okay, I'm also going to say yes, and I'm going to go 3 by Sky. Number 2, cost cutting and other tight cost controls will continue to be the norm until the economy bounces back in the latter half of 2025.
That's a gimme. That's a yes.
That's a gimme. The only thing that's vaguely tendentious is the latter half of 25 because, man, it feels like we're in a hole. Number 3, a very high-profile TV broadcaster will leave their position.
Yes.
Surely that happens every year.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But you got a prediction?
I'm going to say Simon Dello.
Same. Number 4, now that it has organised itself into 2 separate business, Stuff will sell its masthead publishing division, including the Press and Post newspapers and associated digital subscription business. NZME tops the shortlist of potential buyers.
Yes.
I think yes, with the caveat that... No, I'm just going to say yes. Okay. 5, that leaves Stuff as a digital-only business, allowing a business like Trade Me to partner up or buy it, partly to offset the rise of NZME's One Roof property portal.
Okay, so obviously NZME's One Roof property portal, great, amazing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure about the Trade Me thing. Trade Me feels like it's in a really weird place at the moment. And didn't Fairfax buy Trade Me? And
so
then
Fairfax owned Trade Me and sold it, which was public listed. It was bought by private equity. I've heard this rumour.
Wow,
the Trade Me buying Stuff rumour from somewhere else. I cannot possibly believe it because it's owned by private equity, because they're so focused. Owning a news operation is such a pain. I can imagine them kicking the tires on it. And there is some kind of beautiful, poetic, full circle thing to it, but I don't see it.
I think the other thing is that Trade Me, as I understand it, is indeed actually suffering a fair bit from the rise of Facebook Marketplace as well. So they've kind of got their own set of
and would those
around
be
one of its core
solvable
businesses
with Stuff? Who knows? An interesting new shareholder will emerge for NZME.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, I like that too. The future business shape of Warner Brothers Discovery and MediaWorks remains clouded, especially with global owners for whom New Zealand might not be a top priority.
That's opaque enough.
Always true. That's been true for like 14 years. 8, Sky TV will secure the All Blacks broadcasting rights and be subject to a takeover, with British-based DAZN a possible buyer. TVNZ, NZME or Stuff will scoop up other rights for rugby matches not covered by the Sky deal.
Yes, they will get the All Blacks broadcasting rights and then be subject to a takeover. You've just said you think 3 will buy it.
No, I think they will buy 3.
Oh, you think Sky will buy 3?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes way more sense than the other way around.
I'm glad we cleared that up. If I don't want people walking around think I was even more of a crazy person than normal.
Duncan said Sky will buy 3. Yeah, I mean, of course other people will scoop up the rights for rugby matches. I mean, Stuff have been doing a lot of sports streaming.
I agree with all this. I mean, it's not completely uncontroversial, but I like the theory of it. NZME and Stuff will double down on video, causing more revenue headaches for traditional broadcasters.
I think everybody's doubling down on video, but yes.
I'm saying yes for Stuff, no for NZME.
Okay.
Number 10, the government will show little urgency to stand up to global tech giants, keeping the fair digital news bargaining bill on hold while the Australian government powers ahead with its own laws that even the playing field.
I'm going to say yes to all of that, but I don't even rate the Australians' chances of evening the playing field anymore because of, I believe they are, as I said, making themselves ungovernable globally.
I agree. I think that yes to us standing pat. I think the Liberals will win the next election, and I think part of it will involve a major realpolitik on trade that will mean that even the might of Murdoch has to be quelled, or maybe he'll be satisfied by some other way, but they will not keep going with this action, sadly, from my perspective. Number 11, I'm not going to do number 11. It's AI will revolutionise media, but the main thing is that he got ChatGPT to write it. So we'll just go with AI will revolutionise media in 2025.
No.
I'm no as well. I think there'll be a lot of back-end kind of systems-y stuff, but I think that the great change will remain a bit further into the future. Number 12, RNZ will continue to insist it's the most trusted media organisation. TVNZ will continue to insist it's the most trusted media organisation. A raft of media trust surveys will throw up all sorts of different results. Can you trust the media trust surveys?
Well, look, we know how I feel about the media trust surveys, and we know how you feel about the media trust surveys. I mean, whatever. If you want to say you're the most trusted according to this and keep on doing that for all eternity, go for it. I don't think it matters. I think audiences make the decision, and yep.
Reject the premise. Agree. 13. Auckland Transport will continue to dither on outdoor advertising contracts. No good for ratepayers or the outdoor media companies that has mucked around for almost 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just basically a comment disguised as a question. 14. Advertising agents, especially the big ones that fall under the Omnicom and IPG umbrellas, will be subject to cost cutting in New Zealand.
Yes.
Obviously. The spin-off will have, here we are. Number 15, the spin-off will have early successful reader donations. Longer-term donation models will continue to be stressed. Expect more media companies to introduce hard paywalls.
Yes, although in our instance, we've been very encouraged by our reader donation open letter campaign support. We've got a long way to go, and I agree about the rest of it.
We clearly talk a lot about this and are aligned on this issue. Number 16, the government will merge NZ On Air and the Film Commission. This is quite a nice punchy one.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that they actually will do that. That's what my sources are saying too, and I think it's the right thing to do. I think it'll also be a total shit storm, not necessarily a shit show. Number 17, a media chief executive will leave their role.
Yes.
Have you got a who?
Michael Boggs at NZME.
That is my prediction too. He's had a very long and very good run, and it's not going to get easier running media businesses. If I were him, I'd go fishing. Number 18, Newstalk ZB cements its spot as the number 1 radio station. Simon Barnett helps haul more FM from number 5 to number 3 by the end of the year.
I mean, yes to the first one. No to the second one.
The only reason that the second one, I agree with the first one. Obviously, that's been true for 40 years. Simon Barnett helps haul more FM from number 5 to number 3. Apparently, in Christchurch, Simon Barnett is, you just have to listen to him. There's some kind of crazy cult around him. So I think on that basis alone, he might get enough share there to make it work. 19, Facebook, devoid of any fact-checking principles or processes, becomes an even bigger hellhole with corporates deserting the platform en masse for fear of brand safety.
I think it's yes to hellhole, and that's been the case for a while. I think it's a question mark around the other one.
Yeah, I'm going to go yes and no, unfortunately. Number 20, RNZ solidifies its position as the third biggest news website in New Zealand behind Stuff and the NZ Herald, but its traditional radio ratings continue to languish.
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. 21. Every media, PR, marketing, and advertising firm will trumpet themselves as the greatest in the world. The Voyager Awards will cut back on its number of categories in light of there not being enough journalists left to enter.
I guess he's talking about the 2026 Voyager Awards because categories are out and they have already been cut. No, I don't think they'll cut back. It's already a fairly light category field as far as I'm concerned. But obviously, yes, everyone will keep trumpeting themselves as amazing and winners of many, many awards.
Yeah, I think that the Voyagers will actually increase in categories as journalists decrease because winning becomes more of a currency than money, which obviously there's not a lot of. Number 22, the performances of TVNZ and RNZ will come under even closer scrutiny from central government. Some in the coalition will question the need to own a television network that does not return a dividend.
Yes, and yes, I feel like there's already unspoken questions or maybe even spoken questions from members of the coalition about that. Yeah,
I agree. I think that sort of kind of screams out as something that ACT could, very much within their worldview to have that question. It's not an illegitimate question. Number 23, an outdoor company will be acquired by another media company.
Yeah, so if I ditch my number one question, I think there's a chance Stuff could acquire an outdoor media company.
Yeah, I still think that a Stuff MediaWorks merger is not implausible. Number 24, Prime Minister Chris Luxon will skip Q&A, not a good look. Chris Hipkins will at least front Q&A, but it also won't be a good look.
I think it's a no. I think Luxon will do Q&A one more time. I think he will do one this year. And I think Carrie is right about Hipkins' appearance on Q&A.
I have already gone on record with a wild prediction that Luxon won't be Prime Minister by mid-year, so I think he won't go on Q&A, but Prime Minister Nicola Willis will. Number 25, and Hipkins, yeah. I mean, I think we could have like a triple spill this year. Like there's just such profound
totally. I mean,
dissatisfaction.
that's a bit of a trick question then, really, isn't it? 24.
Well, I'm choosing to take it as one. And 25, about 20% of these predictions will be correct. I think we're batting over 50%.
Yeah,
so.
I think we should go on record as saying we think 50% will, and then we'll come back and check them at the end of the year.
Sounds great. Let's do that. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. Oh, we were supposed to ask. We're way over time. Tell me about your summer, because I want to talk about two things I did over the weekend.
Oh, yeah, no, my summer was delightful. I didn't read any local news. I read a whole lot of fantastic fiction books. I watched some great films. I cooked. I ate. I walked. I swam. It was beautiful.
Oh,
it was divine.
Love that. You look very refreshed.
How was yours?
Really, really good. I spent a lot of time with my family. I aforementioned good cultural inputs. Brain feels better. And then I had like a week in the city, which culminated in like a couple of events, one of which was Luke Combs on Friday. Got to say, like watching the crowd walking into Luke Combs, just so many incredible fits. I feel like the Luke Combs crowd is probably the most rural crowd you get, probably the most South Island and the most rural.
So it's kind of like country rock, is that right?
Yeah, very country. And I watched half of it from a corporate box, and I thought, oh my God, he hates us, because the previous show he'd felt so warm, and you just couldn't feel anything. And then my daughter Jet got me a GA ticket and ran down to there, and it was just, oh my God, he loves us, and this crowd is having the best time. There were like women with other women on their shoulders, and like kind of Canterbury-looking guys with other Canterbury-looking guys on their shoulders. There were like couples who were like locked together the whole time. It was the most like beautiful, wholesome situation, honestly. And then I went to Sail GP on Sunday, and that sport is going to be big. Like,
yeah,
it was sold out. They run the race so that the finish line is like 10 meters in front of you, and there are these giant yachts like whipping around.
Yeah,
and I'm just like this. I'm really interested in future sports. There's a huge amount of investment going into different sports. There's some that are quite freaky, like Entain, which owns the TAB now, has just signed a license to bring bare knuckle boxing to New Zealand. And I've been looking at some bare knuckle boxing online, and this is like the refs just do not step in. Like it makes UFC look like WWE. It's so hardcore, and I just got like. So there's a lot of future sports that I'm kind of scared of that are coming down the pipe.
Yeah. But you're not scared of Sail GP, right?
So Sail GP, like, so they're going to make money out of that. It's going to be a real thing.
I was down in West Haven yesterday. We went to be kind of amongst it, but we actually went and had a real bougie lunch and walked through West Haven Marina, buzzing, people on boats, yada, yada, yada. And I was talking to my brother who had been out on a yacht the night before. And he said the viaduct was like the 90s. Like it was like 90s Auckland. He said it was messy and fun. It felt like there was a really incredible energy in the city this weekend.
And when you're looking for kind of reasons to be optimistic about this country, which there aren't heaps, you know, the fact that you have Auckland FC playing really well, Waz selling out every game regardless of how they play, Blues finally good again, like this Sail GP thing, which does feel like it's a real stop. We've got 12 concerts a year in Eden Park, events starting to happen, plus CRL coming in, plus Convention Centre, which will bring a lot of things.
Brownie's Pool.
Brownie's Pool.
Which I am a huge fan of.
I swam on Christmas Day and then found out it was not at all safe to swim on it.
Us too. We were there on Christmas Day as well.
It felt so good, right?
But I was completely fine afterwards.
I was just jumping. There was no lifeguard. I was jumping off the pontoon thing anyway. Beautiful.
No, look, I think all this big event, like the $11 trillion experience economy, I think it's all a reaction to the pandemic to a certain extent. And then I also think it's bloody great in the face of, get off your phones, go outside, touch grass, watch some boats go crazy fast.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, I for recording this overlong and somewhat late episode of The Fold. Thank you for listening. And we'll catch up next week.